And John, if she doesn't win tonight, if Senator Warren doesn't win in Massachusetts, does she run the risk of losing that windfall of campaign money that came in the last few weeks, and even the money from the super PAC?
Losing money, losing altitude, losing. I mean, it's early yet, and you don't want to prematurely bury anyone, but losing the state of her birth, potentially losing her home state, failing to clear the 15% bar in a number of other states. These are the outlines of a political disaster. I'm going to turn your question, Lisa, over to Boston City Councilor Matt O'Malley of West Roxbury and Jamaica Plain, who endorsed Elizabeth Warren. Briefly, Matt, what went wrong with this once very promising candidacy, and is this it for her?
I'm not going to say it's it for her. I am with Elizabeth until the last dog dies, proudly so. I support her because I believe she is the best candidate, would be a remarkable president. But to answer your question, I think part of her strength as a candidate, in my opinion, was that she could both appeal from the so-called Biden camp and the Sanders camp and be a real unifying voice. When you've seen so many other candidates drop out so quickly, and you've seen a Biden surge and a really strong Sanders surge all along through this first contest and beyond, it left a little oxygen for her. And there's no question this is not the way she wanted tonight to go. As a supporter, it's not the way I wanted tonight to go. But the voters are having their say.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Tanisha. You did not endorse anyone, so I'm counting on you to be more blunt here. What went wrong with this campaign?
I actually think we can trace this back to the conversation, probably late fall, on health care. I think, you know, her plan came out a little too late, and more so the explanation of how the plan would be paid for was, again, much too late. And I do think that gave a little bit of space for some of the other candidates to come in. Now, that being said, we cannot ignore the fact that you know, Elizabeth Warren is arguably, we know that Tulsi Gabbard is still in the race, but arguably the most viable woman candidate, actually in the whole field, even when there were 20-plus candidates, and certainly today still remains one of the strongest candidates, period, in the race, the most prepared candidates, one of the most prepared candidates in the race, one of the most thoughtful candidates in the race when it comes to addressing the issues that are most important to Americans today. That being said, there are still questions that people ask about her electability, and oftentimes it comes down to whether or not you know, America can and will elect a woman president.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute here, because when this race started, it was coming off of a midterm election in 2018 where women were leading the charge in taking back the House for the Democrats. There were 6 women, all qualified on the debate stage originally. Now it's down to one top-tier candidate, Warren, and Tulsi Gabbard's, frankly, zombie campaign at this point. Was Elizabeth Warren, to some extent, victimized by a sexist double standard in our political culture?
I would say yes. Again, Elizabeth Warren was clearly, regardless of whether, you know, you aligned with her campaign or not, she was clearly one of the most, if not the most, prepared, thoughtful candidates is in the race. You know, you name the issue, she had a plan, and not just any plan, a plan that was thoughtful, a plan that was pragmatic, a plan that was actually reasonable and could be accomplished.
But as you just pointed out, Tanisha, on the biggest issue of all, the issue most important to primary voters, health care, she didn't have a plan, and when she did come out with it, it really wasn't ready for prime time. Matt, what gives?
I think it was a crucial mistake, and maybe she should have thrown a little bit of a tougher elbow towards Senator Sanders early on, and make a real differential. There's no question sexism plays a role in our politics in our country. There's no question that the way that our primary process unfolds with caucuses of states that aren't really representative of the rest of the country doesn't help us. And I would just further remark that the last woman to lead a party's nomination for president got 3.5 million more votes than the man who's currently in the White House. So this clearly shows that we need to not only fix our primary caucus system, but fix the Electoral College as well.
I want to bring in my colleague Lisa Hughes, who has a question for you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, John, quick question. No matter what happens tonight with Elizabeth Warren, she has positioned herself, though, as a strong voice going forward into the convention this summer, and maybe even with respect to the party platform, hasn't she?
Oh, I think there's no question, and I think that you will see, no matter what happens, and again, I'm with her, but she will be viable in many, many states. She will continue to accrue delegates. The timing and sort of the process for her campaign is up to her, but she is a national voice and will continue to be.
Wait a minute. Toward what end? I mean, let's say she has a couple hundred delegates. What is the scenario under which that really winds up mattering? Let's say it's a contested convention.
Yep.
No one has the number needed for the first ballot. Is there some scenario under which she becomes the consensus nominee? I can't see that.
Well, I think what's interesting about Elizabeth Warren, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? But one of the things I think is interesting is that even for people who did not vote for her, folks that I've spoken with, who did not vote for her, her message resonates.
Okay.
And they wanted to believe, and they wanted to cast a ballot for her. But I heard from many folks who said, you know what, they weren't sure if she could win. And so they cast they went a different way. That being said, her message resonates. So she does have a place not only, in this potentially, in this campaign cycle, but absolutely she could be an influential player at the convention.
Do you see her throwing her support behind Sanders?
I don't know. I mean, she will continue to throw her support behind herself for as long, and I will be right there behind her. I think she'll make that decision going forward.
Well, I want to wrap up with one other point here. In Virginia, according to exit polling. Now, Virginia is a state with not exactly comparable to Massachusetts, but has a lot of heavily populated, urbanized counties, bordering the District of Columbia, for instance, high levels of college education. 57% of the participants in the exit poll were women, and Elizabeth Warren campaigned successfully for female congressional candidates as recently as the last cycle in Virginia. Among women, Elizabeth Warren tonight drew 11% of the vote, and those anemic numbers have been duplicated in some other states. How is it that women have not rallied more around this singular, impressive female candidate? Real quickly, Tanisha.
Well, I mean, women generally speaking, didn't rally around Hillary Clinton. So there is a conversation to be had about that. Of course, when we disaggregate the data, I have to say this. 98% of black women got that vote right, I will say,
Okay.
in 2016. Nevertheless, I do think we have a challenge here when it comes to women supporting women running for the highest office in the land.
Yeah.